Alright guys, time to talk about topology and what it is, why it's important, and everybody's talking about it, but very few people actually understand it from the get-go. There's some good videos on YouTube about topology, and some of them go too in-depth for what we need, and obviously you should, if you're really interested in this stuff, go and check them out. But to make it clear, essentially it is how your object is laid out in terms of vertices and loops. I'm going to hide all of this jazz here so that we can work in a clean slate. Well, sort of a clean slate. Maybe I really should have added these schmucks to the skeleton bit or the controller bit. Yeah, I will do that. I will do just that. So there we go. They're hidden. Select both, please. Add selected object. There we go. Okay, now we got a clean slate. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and create a polycube. I'm going to move this aside, and I'm going to create another polycube with 1, 1, and 1. And now I'm going to create another one with 2 height divisions. Right? So now we've got this cube, we've got this cube, and we've got the fat cube. Now, visually, they all look exactly the same. They don't have any particular differences if you don't click on them. As you can see, I mean, realistically speaking, there's no difference between the three cubes here. However, there's one very important difference in the fact that obviously this one has a lot more vertices, in other words, more components to it, allowing me to perform more deformation operations, such as, let's say I go into face mode and I select these 3 faces, and I can move them out, or I can extrude them out, right? So whatever I decide to do, I've got all these things available to me. Here, obviously, I have only one face, and my control is a lot more limited in terms of my capability. If I try to extrude this, I'm going to extrude the whole thing, right? So this is undesirable. If I need to perform some operations on this cube, I'm going to need more than just one face. And here, my face is split up. So if I wanted to, I'd have to either grab these 2 or create another set if I wanted to have a more precise control here. So even then, I still have only one. Like in terms of to perform the same operations, actually it would be impossible for me to create the same shape from this setup here, because I'm going to need more points, more vertices. So there's that. So what is topology other than your availability of control? Essentially, this is all there is to it, but there are some important notes to remember. Topology also refers to the fact that you don't need quads or tris. For this, I'm going to actually create a sphere as well, because you can't go anywhere without a sphere. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees so that it's just easier to see something here. So notice, actually this is a little bit too populated. Let me go ahead and reduce the subdivisions on it to, actually let's just reset the settings and create the sphere here. Okay, I'm going to rotate this again a 90 degree. Oops, not this bit, this bit. Come on, seriously, this bit. Oh, for crying out loud. Alright, select both of these, zero them out, and now rotate, I don't know, in X. Always have troubles with figuring out which axis to rotate across. Okay, there we go. Now we have it. Now we're going. Now we're rolling. Okay, notice here, if you take a look at the top here, this is a problem, right? If you've been paying attention, I've told you that you want to have quads only. You don't want triangles. And what do we have here? We have a ton of triangles. Now, this is not really causing an issue as it is, but in some cases it might when you try to smooth things out, because this point right here, this vertex, is called a pole. And there's different types of poles. There's a 5-point pole, a tri-point pole, and obviously an endpoint pole. And this is an endpoint pole. If you notice here, it's got loads of edges connected to it, because this is, right, there's one edge, another edge, a third edge. Others have only 4. right? This is what you want in most situations. 4 or 3. Okay, you don't want to go 5 and above. It is possible to have 5, but it usually creates problems with loops. And here is the main issue with having these poles. So I'm going to go into edge mode here, and I'm going to double click. Notice how there is no, like, I'm not getting a full edge. And you might say, well, how is this an issue, right? You can just shift and double click on this side, and there's your whole full edge. Well, you're not going to have such perfect shapes in most situations. And, you know, if I decided to deform something, let's say I wanted to deform this bit here to create something different, it does not create a good situation, because if I smooth this out, I'm going to get some issues once I start adding detail here, right? So you definitely don't want to be having that. Now, in this case, and in most cases, poles are unavoidable in situations such as caps for cylinders and poles for spheres, and it is entirely possible, and there's loads of plugins which unfortunately do not work in Maya. I'm going to hide this, by the way, to have more space, that create a cap, and it is entirely possible to create a cube cap. In other words, you'd select all these faces, you'd delete them, and then you would create a plane that would have exactly the same amount of edges as this whole setup here, and then you'd manually hook them up together, which is perfectly acceptable. But it is most of the time more work than it's worth. Okay, unless you find problems, you really shouldn't be bothering removing the poles, and as such, really, it's not a big issue. Now, here's the main component of how edge loops work. If you take a look here, I've already told you how this does not go throughout the whole sphere, but this one does. Okay, this one does. This one does. The reason being is that an edge loop is considered an edge loop when there is a vertex that is connected to to 4 other edges, so that Maya can figure out, right, there's an edge loop here. Let me give you an example. Let's go ahead and select our simple. Actually, let's go ahead and select this one. Notice how if I try to create an edge loop here, it will not create an edge loop. Maybe I should have created another type of edge loop, but here's another one that will. So if I try to, let's say I try to select this face here. Now, obviously, I could just select the face and convert my selection to edges, and this would create the exact same selection. But here I get the whole loop because there's a crossroad everywhere, right? There's a cross here, cross there. Now, if I really wanted to, okay, let me just isolate this sucker. If I really wanted to go ahead and make this an edge loop, I'd have to go and select the face and extrude it inwards. If I could just grab this bit here. Come on. Right? So if I wanted to, and now I'm going to have an edge, so I'm going to press F3, F2 again, and now when I click, I'm going to have an edge because they all connect together. There's this edge here is running across this vertex, and this vertex now has 4 points. Now this has created another issue because this vertex here has 3 points, right? 1, 2, and 3. If we take a look here, that's exactly what it is. And if I try to create an edge loop now, it's not going to work. In order to fix that, we're going to need to use the multi-cut tool, right, and start connecting these edges here. Maybe create another edge on this side and on this side so that we can create edge loops. It depends on what you want to do, okay? If you have a mouth, you want to have more edges across the mouth following the muscular curvature of your, like the actual anatomy, okay? Because this will make it much easier to deform because all of your edges are running across the correct the correct points. So if you had something like an eye, right, and you wanted to move the eye, you'd have to have something circular around the eye, maybe 2 or 3 edge loops, so that when you grab a whole edge loop, you could deform the eye in such a way that it works for you. All right. So essentially, that is really it. There's not much else to talk about when it comes to topology. You want to avoid all sorts of weird things by basically focusing on the fact that you need quads, not all the time, but most of the time. All right, whenever the amount of work required to get rid of a triangle outweighs the benefit of having a quad, you'll probably be better off with a triangle, unless of course you're on some kind of geometry that is very deformative, such as a shoulder or a neck or something similar that twists a lot or just deforms. All right, so you want to have quads there for better deformation. In this situation, though, obviously this is a little bit ridiculous. And like I said, there's way better tutorials out there if you want to go deeper and dive deeper into topology, just to figure out how exactly it works and why is it needed. Now, I don't focus that much on topology because, in my opinion, you know, there's borderline perfectionism there. Sometimes you'd be better off just leaving a triangle, such as with caps. There's definitely people out there they just hate this and they create their own caps, and there's scripts that do that for them. Honestly, to be fair, if I really wanted to, I could just download some kind of script and run it every time I create a sphere. I'm actually a little bit surprised that LT does not create these caps with quads by default, because it's entirely possible and the scripts work really well with these. So I don't see what the big deal is specifically for for Autodesk to implement this kind of functionality. All right. So there's that, and now we're gonna, in the next video, we're gonna start actually retopologizing our mesh with this in mind. Okay, we want to retopologize in such a way that we have more edges to work with where we're gonna deform. So if I go ahead and just delete this, I'm gonna show you what I mean. Let me grab this. Grab this mesh here. Oops, this is my geometry, my bad, the player, that's what we need. And I'm gonna remove the template status of it. So if we take a look here, notice that obviously we got a lot of faces, right? But we also have the caps, which end in a ridiculous amount of faces. And this is really one of the problems with having poles, because the endings of your caps will be very densely populated. Now this is not going to create a big issue when I smooth, because like I said, this is a fairly dense object, and smoothing is not that heavy for such small objects such as this, and really the cap is not going to create a problem. Okay, so like I said, when I retopologize, I will have a pole here nonetheless. On the other hand, though, if we take a look here, how is our object going to move? And this is what you got to think about when you're creating, when you're sorting out topology. Our object is going to bend upwards and together, so a lot of deformation will be performed in this axis. So we need a lot of edge loops in this axis. Okay. If I lift this up, well, I'll probably show it to you. You'll probably see what I'm talking about when we retopologize this whole thing, because I might delete a couple of edge loops just to show you how this whole thing is going to operate. All right. So yeah, definitely go ahead and check this out if you want to go a little bit deeper on this. I think that's enough information and you'll probably, even if you do, you probably won't get the required knowledge. It's just practice. When you create a couple of mistakes here and there, when you figure out that, oh, I got to go back in and fix some kind of topology issue, you won't do it next time. All right. So topology is something that you basically grasp with time. I'm not a specialist on topology, and actually I'm not a specialist in anything really when it comes to these things. It's just more jack of all trades type of thing. But at the end of the day, you want to have at least a basic understanding of what topology is, how to avoid some common pitfalls, and if you have a problem with your deformation, so that you know how to fix it. Okay. All right. Next video we will retopologize our player character model mesh.